Hey everybody, it's Atominator, and in this one we're going to be taking a look back at one of the original legends of bodybuilding, Steve Reeves. So earlier this week I took a poll to see whether or not you guys believe he was really natural, and let me explain why I asked that. So here's the thing. I wanted to make a proper video on Reeves, since I've never really spoke much about the guy before, except briefly in passing, like in my top 20 most aesthetic list, where I basically wrote him off because he lacked the muscularity to be adequately compared to more modern, enhanced bodybuilders. And perhaps that was a little harsh and disrespectful on my part, and that's why I wanted to sort of make amends here and feature him in a full-length video to give the man the credit he deserves. Because this dude was basically Arnold before Arnold, okay? He was an extremely popular and influential champion bodybuilder who was well ahead of his time, and just like Arnold, was able to leverage his aesthetic physique and good looks to become a movie star back during the 1950s and 60s. In fact, at his peak, he became the highest paid actor in all of Europe. He even played the iconic role of Hercules, just like Arnold would later go on to do. But as for his bodybuilding career, Reeves competed back in the 1940s and early 50s, well before the advent of the Mr. Olympia. His two biggest wins were the 1947 Mr. America contest and the 1950 Mr. Universe, at which point he retired at, get this, the tender age of 24, a time when most pros today would just be getting started. But anyway, as I was trying to brainstorm a catchy title for this video, I figured I could reference the fact that he was probably the greatest natural bodybuilder who ever lived. But then I was like, hang on, wait a moment, was Steve Reeves really natural? And as I started delving into it, one thing quickly became clear, and that is that there's no real consensus on the matter. Oh, many people seem very sure one way or another, and cite evidence to supposedly prove that Reeves was natty or juicing, but then someone else comes along and contradicts those claims and provides compelling evidence to the contrary. And so I'm not surprised at the results of this poll, which were fairly divided between the three options, though I would have thought more people would have voted for yes. Personally, I'm still kind of on the fence here, but I would definitely lean towards him being fully natural as he claims, as his physique doesn't look anything beyond the realm of natural potential. I mean, come on, there's Olympic gymnasts today who are more jacked than this guy. The only reason I'm even somewhat skeptical is because back in those early days, they were at a real disadvantage in terms of supplements and nutritional knowledge and even training equipment. But by today's standards, he wouldn't even raise a red flag. I mean, in this sea of fake natties, there's way more suspicious characters than Mr. Reeves. Now, granted, if he were full natty, he's got some premium genetics on his side. But even if he was chemically enhancing, he's still got very favorable genetics because that skeletal structure, which is damn near ideal, is something no amount of drugs can change. You're either born with that or you're not. Still, I don't think a lean body weight of 215 to 220 pounds or so at a height of 6'1" is that outrageous. Nor are his measurements for that matter. And while we're talking measurements, it should be noted that Reeves prized proportions and symmetry over gaining mass at all costs. And to that end, I'm sure he'd be utterly appalled with the current state of bodybuilding. Reeves believed that the ideal proportions were to have the upper arms, calves, and neck all of equal size, and famously stated that if your arms are bigger than your head, something is wrong there. But back to the question of performance-enhancing drugs. So did he or didn't he? I mean, steroids were definitely around in Reeves' time, but without a solid knowledge of the history of steroid usage in America, which I have very little interest in exploring, there's no way to be sure, and hell, even then, even if you could pinpoint the exact time and place that anabolic steroids were first introduced and administered in the United States, that wouldn't prove anything. Just because the substance was available doesn't mean Reeves was taking it. But you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. People are going to believe whatever they want to believe, and the way I look at it is like this. I think most of us would agree that a physique like Steve Reeves is attainable naturally. Certainly not by everyone, let's make that distinction. This level would only be achievable for those who win the genetic lottery, so to speak, say in the 98th percentile or so. But again, 18.5-inch arms, drug-free, on a 6'1" frame is hardly preposterous. So given the assumption that it is possible, does it really matter if Reeves was actually drug-free or not? Let me get philosophical with y'all for a moment. So there's this age-old debate that's been going on for centuries on whether or not free will exists. And believe it or not, philosophers still debate this to this very day. And you'd think on the surface, of course we have free will. You make decisions in your life. You're not some puppet or robot just being driven by an external force. I think 99% of the general public would agree that we have free will. And yet some areas of modern day science suggest that we don't, because they've done studies where they can predict our actions and responses based on neural activity in the brain before we are actually conscious of what we're going to do. So this is pretty strong evidence that free will doesn't actually exist. And my response is, who cares? It's safe to say that this is not something any of us are losing sleep over, because even if everything is totally predetermined, the fact of the matter is that the illusion of free will is so powerful, so pervasive in our everyday experience, that for all intents and purposes, we do have free will, even if technically we don't. You get what I'm saying? And I feel the same way about Steve Reeves. Call me naive, but his physique looks like it could be 100% natural, and certainly compared to some of the first bodybuilders we know were on gear beyond a shadow of a doubt, like Sergio and Arnold and even Larry Scott, Reeves is an obvious step down muscularity-wise, conditioning-wise. So if he was using, you can bet your ass the dosages would have been extremely minimal. But I would hazard to say that he was indeed drug-free, and given his pedigree as a former Mr. America and Mr. Universe, as a pioneer of the sport and also the highest profile pre-Golden Era bodybuilder ever, that would have to make Steve Reeves the greatest natural bodybuilder of all time. That's my opinion anyway. You're certainly entitled to your own, and we can debate it further in the comments section below if you like. I really don't want to dive down this rabbit hole anymore, though, because given how long ago it was, by this point in time, it really is a messy state of affairs with a lot of he said, she said, rumor type shit. And I don't think too many of the personal claims against Reeves hold much weight, so that's why I didn't get into all that here. If you're really interested in further discussion, Jerry Branham over at Generation Iron makes a pretty convincing argument for why bodybuilders pre-1960 almost certainly didn't take anabolic steroids, and I'll link to that vid in the description below. In any case, Reeves still had one of the best and most appealing physiques of all time. Don't know about you guys, but there's not too many top pros I would honestly want to look like, and virtually none competing today. I mean, sure, in the context of a bodybuilding stage or the gym maybe, it might be cool to walk around at 5'8", 250 plus pounds, but outside of those environments, you would tend to look downright foolish, at best a big bulky meathead, at worst a grotesque lumbering freak show. Women don't want this, guys. Reeves might not have been as impressive by modern day standards or even compared to the Golden Era icons who would come after him, but he still looked athletic and attractive wearing normal clothes walking around in everyday life. I mean, look at how jacked he looks when he's standing next to regular people. That's when it really hits home and you realize just how big and how great this guy was. And you just know Buddy was getting some mad tail back in the day too. But anyway, this is definitely a more realistic standard for bodybuilding and an image we can all strive towards, and that deserves celebrating. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please drop a like if you enjoyed. Whether you agree with me or not, I hope we can all appreciate the aesthetic ideal that Steve Reeves represented and helped to pioneer. So stay tuned for more, and until next time, I'm the Tominator signing off, and I'll be back.